2.
I grant you permission to speak. Shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you! Never lose hope.
Here for a chat.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, friend!
Welcome to episode 424 of Go and Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Friday, December 8th, 2023 in the evening. Coming to you from Nomergon, Ohio, it's me, Edelweiss. From North Rend, Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
From Teldrassil, California, we have Megasa.
Hello.
And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. As always, thank you for your reviews. If you would like to support the show but cannot do so monetarily, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast feed of choice, as it always helps other people find the show. So, I don't know about the rest of you, although I guess I kind of know about Wicked Pod. This has been... Honestly, the week was fine, and then today was a week. This is my first week of like full-time childcare for my own daughter, which largely has been easier than taking care of my nephew because he was very active and older, right? This is a younger age. So a lot harder to know the source of when she's crying. And I've spent a lot of time just like going to my brother's for lunch or you know, my in-laws take care of her for we're starting out with just like, an hour per grandparent each week, and then they're going to ramp it up to 2 and then 3 hours so that I can actually like get a stream in eventually. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of bouncing around trying to keep my sanity, and it was going great until today. And today she just the night was tough and the morning was tough, and she just was like not taking the bottle well, not sleeping well. And of course I'm like, you I know you're tired. like like you fell asleep in the car on the way home from lunch, but then woke up after 13 minutes in the car seat. I like snuck the car seat in. She was still asleep, put it in her room. I'm outside the room for 2 minutes, and then she wakes up, and I'm just like, no. and at that point, there was no getting her to go back to sleep. So, for any Sandman fans out there, it is implied that one of the villains, his mom, used the Sandman's like reality warping stone to make him sleep as a baby. And I get it now. Yep. So that's been my week.
And then, did you get any time to play Hearthstone, or have you just been
I did.
playing, trying to get the baby to sleep?
So generally it's been less time than obviously pre-kid, but I think especially recently it's just been like, well, since I'm on all day and Rachel's back at work, I can't risk, even when she's napping, like maybe at the start of a nap I can start a game. But I've mostly been playing Final Fantasy VII Remake because that I can actually pause. Whereas I don't want to end up in a situation where I start a game and then have to concede because she surprise was not actually asleep. And, I got to go back in and soothe her again. So I've been playing like after she's asleep or getting in various games in here and there. It's been a lot of suboptimal play because I have not been in the best mental state. But also these metas are tough for me. I feel like there's a lot of possible decks to play, even if there's some clear like, oh, these decks are pretty good. I feel like it's a very wide open meta, and there's so many options, and it's so hard to know what other people are doing. I ran into a totem shaman today.
Oh.
At one point, even though I've been, to tell you how my week's been, my best deck has been Plague Decay. I did still, in early development of that deck, run into someone that was just, I checked, not out of an ETC, just a main deck steam cleaner, just hanging out. And I ran into an ogre rogue that had ETC with a steam cleaner in the ETC that I did manage to patchwork away from a generated patchwork, and ended up getting blown out by a Reno that I didn't expect, because their deck was in no way Highlander. They just expect to draw enough through
Oh,
their deck.
sure.
I've
Yeah.
seen lots of
As
those,
one
yeah.
does.
And then I'm like, should I be doing that? I mean, I don't know. Just for those longer games, should I, have a Reno in the ETC? It also feels presently like Ignis is everywhere, such to the point that if you are not playing a hyper aggressive deck, you kind of have to run a Viper and another Viper in the ETC because if you can't deal with a 10 mana weapon, you just lose. And so I had a lot of development on my Plague Decay to finally hit a version that I was satisfied with, taking a page out of the Dragon Druids book, where they had the celestial thing, 2-drop, that gives you a temporary copy of something to play that turn.
Oh, Celestial Projectionist? Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you run 3 minions that can get, or I run 3 minions that can get reduced to 0. There's Reska and the Guardians. And those are all fantastic to get an additional copy of for 2 mana, similar to the Druids, playing an extra copy of Fi. So, and every once in a while, I use it on something else. If you stick a Primus, you can get another Primus, or various other things in a pinch. You can, for 6 mana, get an additional copy of the 2-drop Death Rattle Plague minion. So like, there's just lots of flexible uses for if you manage to stick a minion. Sometimes I even do it on a school teacher Noggling, right?
Yeah.
And it's felt pretty good. I had someone add me after I beat them, and not flame, but ask for the list. So I mean, that tells you
Wow.
how inspired it was.
The praise from Caesar is what that is. Like,
and yeah, many a Highlander deck has been shut down. So
I always accept the friend request just in case, especially if I'm playing a weird deck. I do have someone in the Discord was recommending that if you think they might flame you, just like wait a few minutes, like play 2 more games and then accept their request. Because if they were in the middle of like, they might be over it by then. But if they wanted the deck list, or they just want to say, hey, are you the podcast host? Then they probably still want to say that 10 minutes later. So
maybe, although they don't always notice that you've accepted later.
That's true.
Yeah. I'm at the point where if you run into me on ladder and you're not active, if somebody coin concedes to me, then I will accept the friend request. Like, that is, because that is an obvious listener. I will accept that friend request. If you are playing against me and that doesn't happen, like, I am not accepting the friend request unless like they ping me on Discord. Like, I assume that anybody who's listening to the podcast knows my Twitter handle and knows how to get in touch with me in Discord, and they can ping me there. So I'm not. I've no good comes of it otherwise. Usually.
I usually accept. Sometimes I don't notice that it was sent, and then I feel bad because I'm like, oh, I didn't see that. Just because so frequently it has been an ad of like, hey, are you Edelweiss? Because there's like the podcast and casting. So I try to accept generally. I also have this attitude of like, it's just funny sometimes, the things people say. And if I'm not in the right mindset for it, then I won't accept. But usually I'm just like curious. One time I didn't even understand the insult. It was not like in another language or anything. I was just like, is that? I think someone called it a Mongol deck or something. I was so
What?
confused. I'm like, is that good? Is that bad? The Mongol Empire was one of the greatest in history, right? Like,
I mean, it depends on your point. Depends on which side you were on, I suppose.
well,
but-
sure, one of the largest. Like, yeah. So, but anyway,
Well, I've basically done my version of playing Plague DK this week, which is playing Hunter to Legend. Because this meta has turned me into an aggro player. So there was a tweet from Sottle over the weekend where he basically said, this is the only deck that's working for me. And I think someone responded to him like, I can't believe you're promoting a Remo deck. And he said, when you're at the garbage buffet, you find the trash that you want to eat. So I don't know that I necessarily agree that the meta is that bad, but it's clearly not the kind of thing that he likes to play, which is fair. But I ended up, he was running a list that was more all in on the death rattle synergies. So that list runs double buzzard. So that you just hard mulligan for buzzard, and then you're going in on the cleave plan, but you just have one copy of it. So you just try to find the buzzard so you could turn on the Reno effects. And like the Reno effects in that deck are like Feldurin's really, really good. That's actually the reason you're running Highlander. Like I played like 40 some odd games to Legend. I maybe played Reno 2 or 3 times over the entire like 45 games, just because like you either don't get there or you don't find it. And it's not really the reason that you're playing the deck. Like Feldurin is just like Olgra, but 4 mana and with less setup. So and like with Hope of Quel'Thalas, it's like 5 damage face plus, wiping out the board. But anyway, I didn't end up playing his version of the list. I ended up playing a Big Beast version of the list that was actually running Renathal. But again, you have enough tutors that it doesn't matter. Like you're running Faithful Companions that's getting beasts out of the deck. You're getting the secrets out of the deck with Costume Singer. And like ultimately you want there to be more cards in there so that you don't draw the stuff that you're trying to cheat out. So it kind of works. And like the curve is so low that it doesn't matter. Like I regularly killed people on 6 or 7 just because like I would just tempo out and they couldn't do anything about it. There was one game that I played against an Enraged Warrior where they had played Anima Extractor on 2, and then they got like 1 damage on it. And then on 3 they Bloodsworn they faceless it. I can never remember the name of that card. But they faceless it, and then I played Theldurin, cleared them both. And I still have the Theldurin left over because it has immune. So they play a 4/7 Acolyte. I play Chameleon, the Chameleon card, the 4-cost spell that gives it +3/+3, like a random effect. Well, I rolled poison, and they were done playing at that point.
Yep. Yeah, that card can end games, like depending on the roll. Like Divine Shield is gross as well because a Death Rattle summon a 3/3 Divine Shield is very frustrating.
There are a bunch of like Stealth is gross, Reborn's very gross. Because like then the 3/3 that pops out gets all those things too, and that's a gross card when you could stick something. But it worked pretty well. I mean, I had a 70% win rate from like Plat 8 to Legend with 10x, so it worked out. But then I started playing that at Legend, and I didn't really want to play it anymore. I'd like played it enough, and also like there's a lot more mage and a lot more decks that can kind of just ignore everything and win anyway. And then today I found someone who posted Earthen Paladin.
I've been seeing Earthen Paladin. Yes, there's like multiple different kinds of lists going around, even in like the Vicious Syndicate Discord where I lurk sometimes to see what they're doing on decks, especially now that the podcast is not there. Like people are cooking Earthen Paladin.
Don't give me hope.
No, it's actually I had a positive win rate with it, and it's actually just a tempo deck that has the Earthens for reload.
I mean, that makes
So
sense.
so you're running like all of the, the low end. I mean, every paladin deck's a boogie down deck at this point, right? So
Oh yeah.
you're running a bunch of one drops so that you can get the boogie down to go off. You've got like the showdown prismatic beam combo, and then you just run the earth and stuff. And you have like deputization or a keeper strength. I had one game against a druid today where I stuck an 18-15 earthen on turn 8 and they couldn't clear it. And that was just the end of the game. Like they didn't draw Reno. They had Eonar. I was able to just like clear Eonar with Showdown, Prismatic Beam, and whatever else was left in my hand. And like Amethyst helps you clear too, and Keeper Strength is just a stupid card.
Keeper
And
strength is so good.
yeah, and like you just like get a whole bunch of crap down, and then you tears, and then you get it all back, and then you keep hitting them, and they just don't have a chance to get ahead. I mean, you can, if you don't draw one drops to start off with, like if you don't have early tempo, it can be rough. But like if you get any sort of a tempo start to just make your opponent play reactively, it worked reasonably well, particularly into druids that just want to spend the early turns ramping. And then, okay, well, I'm just going to make these bigger and bigger and make you deal with them and not let you just ramp and draw and do whatever you want to do. So, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with after the nerfs that we'll talk about in excruciating detail. But okay, so what have you been up to this week?
Well, I have also had a somewhat busy week just with work, but it's cram time before finals. But I did definitely get in some time to play. Mostly been playing Paladin, just climbing. That's a really reliable deck for me. I've been playing various versions, Garden's Grace versions, Dude Paladin, just cut order and kept going. And I actually had Dude version with Garden's Grace, and it all works pretty well together. You don't discount the Garden's Grace as quickly necessarily, but I've definitely still gotten just some very big guys, before they can Reno it. So often pretty effective, and sometimes they just have all the control answers. Paladin has a lot of 1 health things in Divine Shield, so if they can do multiple bursts of AoE, but I definitely am getting a better sense of when are they not likely to be able to deal with this, and I just go in and take the risk and put it on and say you can deal with this or you can't in ways, or if they are likely to deal with it, how do I hedge my bets enough that I'm not going to lose because I hedged my bets too much. So, and sometimes you just have to find out. I did play some Highlander Hunter after I saw that you were playing it, and I was also playing a sort of beast version, although 30 cards, and it did have like Faithful Companions and Stranglethorn Heart for burst at the end. And the Faithful Companions, it did feel, getting the thing out of your hand, you could still get 2 things sometimes if you lined it up right. And that could be definitely the game-winning thing. I definitely did have a positive win rate with it, sometimes fast and sometimes for the big beast plan. It felt fairly flexible that way. I also played a clergy priest that I saw and said I have to play this, even though I know it's going to tank me further from Legend and be the reason I don't hit Legend before the show. I called it Draw My Whole Deck, I guess. So it's just get as many clergies as possible and play as many thirsty drifters as possible. And sometimes you get there. Like, it doesn't have the thief priest thing on the top end. There's a Reno for after you drew your entire deck if you need just to clear their taunts or something, or you need the hero power. Although I will say I almost never got that off. It was either like the last card in my deck, or there was a duplicate at the very end of my deck and I needed it like slightly before. Like it was only useful once, but it was just play all the things in your deck and thirsty drifters, and I did get there a few times, but I will also probably blame it for not hitting Legend yet. I also saw that Donkey had posted what is misleadingly called a Naga Priest. It does have Serpent Wig in it, but it's really a Pip 1-cost card deck and a Thirsty Drifter deck. But I found it much more effective. It does run Clergy, it does run some Overheal, it runs Dreamboat, which is the Overheal Naga that gets +1/+1 for everything that it overheals. That also actually is a really good activator for Clergy, which was a problem I was having in the other version. You have the funnel cakes to mana cheat. So if you draw things in the right order, and you don't necessarily, you actually toss Wig in the mulligan. Feels so weird to toss Wig in the mulligan unless you have like a Slither to go with it.
That's sacrilege. I don't know how to react to that.
Unless you have something to go with it, you have to toss it. But when you do have it, sometimes you can get a bunch of copies and go off with it. But other times it's like just an incremental board advantage. And then you do have, let me pull up the exact, I was playing with a couple of different versions of this. You have Astalor for a little bit of extra. School Teacher, you copy the Nagalings. Thirsty Drifter, you try to copy that. Almanthul, because that just goes in every priest deck that exists. Mindseer does some damage. There's also a Miracle Salesman because it's a 1-mana 2/2, and it can help you get a little extra draw. And Drone Deconstructor because that discounts your Thirsty Drifters by 2, because you have 2 1-drops. The World 8 even suggested, although I didn't actually try this, but I think it's hilarious, you put Pelagos in, not only for the wigs, but also because Miracle Salesman, the 0-mana spell, you could play it on anything.
That's amazing.
Very cool, very cool.
Yeah, he was suggesting replacing, at first there had been a Light It Burns that then we replaced with Drone Reconstructor. It was like a Pelagos and a Shard for the Dragon Druids, which was the main matchup I just could not get through, was Dragon Druid. So the Shard might be helpful there. Then Donkey had a version with Astral Automaton and Celestial Projectionist. Possibly Animate Dead, we weren't sure about that. And so that's not your main game plan, it's just other things that you can copy with Pip and put down. And of course, you have Power Chord Synchronize already, you have Handmaiden already. I don't know if this is it. I think maybe Shadow Priest with Thirsty Drifter might be a better way to play Thirsty Drifter. I've been looking at lists like that as well. But it was more real than I thought it was going to be, by a lot. I am actually still positive with it, despite losing to a lot of Druids. And Druid did lose some good matchups, or not lose, but like some of its good matchups were nerfed. So maybe a little bit less Druid, at least the faster Druid in our future. But we'll talk more about that very shortly in the news.
Yeah. So why don't we have a lot of news to talk about. So let's let's do that. Maybe.
I was like, have we gone back to not hearing them? What's going on?
No, I'm not hearing it either, so all right, well, we'll do this the old-fashioned way then. 1 second. Sorry. We'll mark this, I guess.
Yeah.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
Okay, so we had 2 patches this week. The second one, with all of the standard balance changes, we are going to talk about in Dexplanations. But we got patch 28.2 first, which is the Battlegrounds content patch. So for starters, we got Battlegrounds Season 6. With the spells, everything was revealed over the past week. And so a lot of this patch notes is just enumerating every single card that was added to Battlegrounds And I know Battlegrounds has a card library. I don't know how I don't know if there's a better way to do it, but there is a lot of detail about everything that was added and changed into Battlegrounds in the patch notes. We are not going to go through that. But rest assured, Battlegrounds is now live with spells, and it seems like I've been playing some Battlegrounds. It seems like it's pretty fun. It's kind of like the best parts of the Ticketus meta, back when they had like the Dark Moon Fair tickets, but you could just kind of choose when you wanted to engage with them. How have you had any time to play any beaches? I'm sure Edel, you probably haven't, because if you can't fit in a game of Standard, you have no chance.
That was
of
exactly
playing
my
Guild.
thinking. Was just like I have heard good things, but yeah, no shot.
I'm definitely looking forward to giving it a try. I hadn't really had a lot of time outside of testing priest decks, but I have heard good things and they seem really fun. I'm definitely excited to give it more of a shot.
Yeah.
As
Yeah,
finals wind down.
Yeah, I've enjoyed I've been playing some more of it, mostly, on my phone or whatever, just because as I'm winding down for the day. But it's been fun. I like having the option to go and grab a spell and like use up some of, like, when you have like 1 or 2 gold, or sometimes when you're rolling and you're not really seeing anything, but you see like 4 mana, you can spin the wheel of Yogg-Saron, or go discover a minion from like your most common class on board or anything like that. So it's been kind of interesting that it gives you some additional strategic options. So it's felt fun. I still have games where I lose and I have no idea why, and I'm like, which way did the truck come from? But I think that's just because I don't main the mode. But I have definitely enjoyed the meta, and I've seen a lot of positive commentary from folks who are typically, the first like week Battlegrounds meta gets very degenerate very quickly, and it seems like this hasn't really gone that way. So it seems like they really hit a good note with the balance, which is positive to see as well. So yeah, you can go and look at the patch notes to see all of the detail. Obviously there are updated armor tiers. There's a new rewards track for Battlegrounds. The one thing to note is that because this is the first week or so of the new set, they've extended the turn timers by 5 seconds each turn to allow people to have time to read. So if the turns seem longer to you, it's not in your imagination. That's actually happening. Typically, that once they do like the first balance patch, they'll ratchet that back. That's just kind of to help people with all the new stuff that's going in and coming out. So they've also added bots to the Battlegrounds ladder. So there have been bots in Constructed for a while. So now there are bots in BGs. So if you're at a low MMR, then you may have some bots in your lobby to kind of help with matchmaking and help get you through those initial games. Especially if there aren't a lot of people at your MMR, it might take a little while to get a game. And they reduced the cost of upgrading from Tavern Tier 4 to Tavern Tier 5 from 11 gold to 10 gold. So that's a significant change as well. We got some card changes for Constructed in this patch that we were not expecting, and these were not the balance patches. These were other cards that were changed either for anomaly reasons, or because basically they just keep breaking stuff. And so they're just changing them to stop them from breaking things every patch. So the anomaly, they returned several anomalies to the anomaly pool. Twist Reality, which is the one that says every time you play a card, it shuffles a copy in your deck. It's now only the first card that you play each turn gets copied, which is better because that at least lets you control it a little bit and not, never draw your Reno. Or, I mean, I can't even imagine trying to play a Reno deck and having that come on. I guess it's fine, right? Because it's just going to keep shuffling stuff in. You just will never draw your Reno, which, whatever. So Opportunity Knocks, which is the one where that says you draw a card you can afford to play, will now check and respect the current top card of your deck if you could already afford to play it, instead of always offering a random card you could afford to play. So basically, this is going to work with Dredge now. Whereas before you could dredge and it wouldn't matter, it would just give you a random card. Now it will.
Right.
Now if you dredge a card that you can afford to play the next turn, it will give you the dredge card. And Cho'Gall, Twilight Chieftain's effect, has been up to a 50% chance of offering an anomaly in your game from 25. And there's still a 100% chance of being offered an anomaly in any games where both players have Cho'Gall in their decks. I presume that this was just didn't feel like it was often enough, especially because there are not probably a lot of people playing with Cho'Gall enough to hit the 100% thing happening. So
Right.
50%, if for the people who are playing Cho'Gall in their deck, is probably fine. If you're not playing Cho'Gall, you probably will still rarely, if ever, see an anomaly. But the Cho'Gall enjoyers can at least get to play with an anomaly more often.
I have not seen an anomaly since the patch, or since the new expansion.
Same, yeah. But this
So.
seems like if someone really wants to play with anomalies, it makes sense
Yeah.
that it should have a higher chance of
I
happening.
feel like that's largely not at our MMR.
Yeah. Bless their hearts. So so that was the anomaly changes. Then we had the card updates and the dev comment, the following cards are being adjusted not because of their power levels, but because they disproportionately cause bugs and other gameplay issues which can be disruptive for players and time consuming to correct. These changes mitigate those problems and help future-proof these cards for updates going forward. These changes are going live in patch 28.2, but they won't be eligible for full dust refunds until our upcoming hotfix 28.2.1, which is the balance changes that just went live today as we're recording this. So you will be able to get refunds for all of these cards. Some of them are epics. So, go search. As always, you can search for refund in the collection manager and see everything that's eligible for a dust refund. So,
Wait, Madam Goya?
yeah. Yeah, we're digging back
man.
far. So, Fate Splitter was changed from get a copy of the card that killed this to get a copy of the last card your opponent played. Monstrous Parrot went from repeat the last friendly death rattle that triggered to get a copy of the last friendly death rattle minion that died. Counterfeit Blade, which I remember playing against and hating that card, by the way.
Yeah.
It was goes from gain a random friendly death rattle that triggered this game to get a copy of a random friendly death rattle minion that died this game.
Wow,
Which is that's a big difference.
So much worse. Like,
Yeah.
that kills that card and Parrot. Now, since they're just in Wild, I'm sure it doesn't super matter because people in Wild, there's a different death rattle weapon that people usually use, the 3-mana one.
And the parrot was basically like that was the X parrot from Monty Python from when it was printed. Like that was never a thing. But yeah, but Counterfeit Blade definitely was. Dwarven Archaeologist goes from a 2-mana 2/3 after you discover a card, reduce its cost by 1 to a 3-mana 3/3 Battle Cry, discover a card, reduce its cost by 1. That's probably a buff because I don't think I ever saw Dwarven Archaeologist be played.
I'm looking at this going,
man,
theoretically, I could have seen this being played because I was playing during that time, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
I feel like in duels or like...
Yeah, or Arena. Yeah, maybe.
Even
in Arena, it's probably bad. Or was bad. It's probably fine now in Arena, but it was probably bad in Arena back then, but yeah.
Just because in duels, there's ways of like getting Discover every turn. Like there's...
yeah, with like the brand hero power before they changed it 6 times, yeah. And then Madame Goya, which is a card from Mean Streets of Gadgetzan.
I know her well.
Goes from choose a friendly minion, swap it with a copy of your deck, to choose a friendly minion, summon any copies of it in your deck.
No, that's so bad.
It's so bad.
I mean, arguably it was bad before, but it was the very early, pre-recruit way of cheating out big stuff from your deck. Like you played Goya Shaman because you could hero power and then swap that totem with, an Earth Elemental or some other large thing from your deck.
I mean, now maybe you could find like a gang up deck or something to make this work with.
It's not the same.
They have other options. I think this is really, there was enough people on the coding side and the QA side who were like, please save us
Like,
Yeah.
from these cards no one cares
do
about.
do
except
these
for
cards
us.
matter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the game is nearly 10 years old, which means that we've got 10 years of like these stupid card interactions that we're just not testing for, right? Like nobody expects them to test for these, right? But then somebody finds them and they have to spend time fixing them. And this is sometimes you just have to say, there, I fixed it. And I mean, it's a valid way to address them. Just like these things keep breaking stuff, just like stop. Like just change the cards so they don't break stuff anymore. So
Poor Madam Goya.
yeah, we'll pour one out for Madam Goya, but yeah.
1600 dust.
I'm debating, like, do I dust her? I should.
You probably do.
But the memories. The memories.
Yeah, you probably just dust her. I mean, that's 1600 dust that you could use for literally anything else.
Yeah, but I don't even need it.
I could probably find a priest card to make gold in or something, but Wintervale, the Wintervale event is starting on December 12th. It's running until January 2nd, which is longer than normal for one of these seasonal events. There is one Shadow in the Badlands pack, 2 standard packs, 2 Ravenous Kraken signature common cards, 2 Angry Hellhound signature rare cards, and a Great Farther Thorum Battlegrounds hero skin. So,
and we finally got those signatures when they revealed all the signatures for Titans, and then we were waiting and waiting and waiting for this Kraken and Hellhound, and then the new expansion launched. We still didn't get them. We're like, did you forget? No, they are here now.
Yeah. You just had to wait for Wintervale to open your presents. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get your presents early. Not everyone gets their presents on Black Friday.
But Blizzard, I want it now.
It is funny having Titans signatures in the middle of this, like, rather than Badlands ones. Sure, but
Sure.
Yeah.
It just works out, or maybe they just that's what they have the art for. Who knows? But anyway, we can get those. That's starting on December 12th. Also, there's going to be Wintervale themed Tavern Brawl starting on December 13th, and Wintervale themed shop offering starting on December 19th.
And presumably also Wintervale themed BMs.
Yes.
In the greetings.
Yes.
Yep.
Happy Feast of Wintervale to you, to all of you, each and every one. So, and then when the new year starts, after Wintervale ends, we are getting another Heroic Tavern Brawl. So Heroic Tavern Brawl returns on January 3rd, and it is the same as most Tavern Brawls. It is standard format. There are no cosmetics that you can earn through Heroic Tavern Brawl this time. Yep. So, I mean, sad for you, probably happy for all the people who are complaining about it. So
I know. Whatever.
Yeah. But, Tavern Brawl it's something, again, we say this every time. If you are looking at the rewards at the top end, keep in mind that if you are not someone who regularly hits top 200 legend, I would not even be looking at the bottom of that chart. Like 12 wins is extraordinarily hard to get for somebody who is not grinding ladder constantly and in high ranks consistently.
My response to the portrait complaints at this point is just like, cry more. Like, I'm getting numbed to crying, So it just
Yeah, fine. This is what it's like to become a parent. You just like stop listening to crying. You just don't hear it anymore. But yeah,
this is something to play for the experience if you want that tournament style experience, but not the expected value.
Yes.
To use an economic term, unless you are someone who's historically done very well on this or is a very high level ladder player, the expected value is probably even or negative. Yeah, if that's worth it to you, then play it, and you might do better. But definitely think about whether this is your budget of gold or money before you start playing. I usually say I'm going to do 1 or 2 of these and then cut it.
Definitely a do as I say, not as I do situation for me, because this is how I get my mini set, right? Like, I don't get the mini set anymore. I play enough Heroic Tavern Brawls that I open packs when the mini set comes out and just have it all.
Yeah. I mean, and in general, like the actual prize of the 12 win run is getting to post the screenshot of the 12 win run on Twitter.
100%. Yeah.
That is the actual prize, and if you are playing it for the rewards, you are probably playing it for the wrong reasons. Make sure that you are going into it expecting to lose all of the gold that you spend and being happy with whatever you end up getting on the other end of it. And that will lead to a much better experience. But if you're playing this trying to profit off of it, you probably, and if you care about the rewards at the end of it, you probably are playing it for the wrong reasons. So we did get a major shop rework as part of this patch, and this is a really, really big deal because the shop had just become almost unusable in basically every class. I mean, it functioned eventually, but it was extremely hard to work. Oh, okay, maybe not on the iPad. I mean, even on the iPhone, it's bad. But yeah,
it shook. Yeah. It would go up and down, and I couldn't click anything. And like, I don't know, it was that way more often than not.
If you waited for a while, it would, at least for me, you had to wait for a significant amount of time, and then it would calm down, and you could scroll normally. But even on the computer, it would do that as soon as you tried to scroll. Yeah. And it was just a lot, even when it worked, a lot to scroll through, and you couldn't actually see details of the hero portraits before you bought them unless you looked elsewhere, or the voice lines unless you looked elsewhere. So they have fixed all of it.
Yeah,
all of those things.
It's so nice. And
so they have tabs now in there that so you don't have to scroll as much.
And this is the biggest deal. 90% of the reason I go in the shop is to get rid of the exclamation points. And you can now, you don't have to like click on the individual offers to make it go away. You can just go tab, 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 and then they're all gone. Just like similar in the collection, right? You don't have to scroll over every single card to make the new thing go away. You can just go page by page, and it notices that you've seen them. And so you can make all those notifications go away so much faster. It's brilliant.
If only the achievements tab worked that way.
If only. Yes, I did I did with my partner the catch-up packs. There's the $5 for 15 catch-up packs deal. Mm-hmm. And he did that plus the extra ones that you get for free, and got almost 50% of all 5 expansions. 760 something cards.
Pretty good.
It was very satisfying, and the only complaint I had about the entire situation was how long it took to click through the collection achievements. Half of every collection achievement for 5 sets took a really long time to click through. But that was a minor thing that they are aware of. But overall, if you are trying to get someone into the game, it is definitely a really good deal. And I think definitely will help me get him to actually play and not just listen to me talk about it much more consistently. I think much more likely than it has been, as well as the next thing in the patch.
Yeah. And you can, so now there's separate tabs for Battlegrounds and Constructed and modes. There are apparently still Mercs bundles in the shop for reasons. So if you want to spend money on mercenaries, you do you. But it makes it a lot easier to find what you're looking for, and also to see what's new, right? Like I usually go in on Tuesdays to see what portraits are new, and that makes it a lot easier to see that. And then you can preview the animations, you can preview the voice lines. It's just a much better experience, and it's way snappier. So I'm sure this is a lot of work for the team, and this is a really, really great upgrade to the client. So really well, worth all the effort that they put into it to get this done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Help
and
us
as
spend
Bagace-
our money, Blizzard.
Yes, yes. Shut up and take my money. So, as Bagisa was alluding to, there's also an update to new player progression. So, after finishing the tutorial, new players will now get access to the new apprentice track, which is an experience replacing the current apprentice ranks and intended to simplify and guide new player development and progression. Modes and classes, including Death Knight, are now earned as rewards on the apprentice track instead of their previous unlock requirements. We're also including the Tavern Guide, a series of quests designed to teach players about Hearthstone's core players and core systems and strategies. The new Apprentice Track and Tavern Guide are expected to take less time to complete than the current apprentice ranks. Rewards for completing the new track include gold, catch-up packs, starter decks, and more. So that's going to be something. It looks like they're actually unlocking classes as you progress, rather than making you play through like all of the individual, or maybe it is still making you play through all of the individual like games with the bare bones starter decks with just the classic core cards or whatever. But
You had to play against the. I know this because I was looking at it the day before they made this change. You had to play against the innkeeper or someone on the like apprentice track ladder with each class, and then Death Knight was a whole separate thing. And my partner was like, "What even is the innkeeper, and how do I find this?" So, because he had opened in the pack opening, he'd opened Liadrin and the Countess. So I'm like, "Pure Paladin, here we come!" And but he didn't have Paladin unlocked. So this seems like a much, like on the one hand, it would be hard for me to just build him a Paladin if it's not early on the progression, but a much more intuitive and quick way to get into the game. I'll definitely report back on this once I've had a chance to play with it. Also, if you want to make a new account and you don't want to do this, you can skip it. You will get all of the classes unlocked, all of the modes, and the loner decks, but you won't get the other rewards if you skip it. So,
Which sounds like catch-up packs would be rewards that you do want.
yes,
yeah,
I've been impressed by them.
I saw a joke about this, which was Hearthstone devs revamp new player experience. Content creators like Zeddy and Bunny Hopper go make new free-to-play accounts to make content around the new player experience. Players who face them cease like rage quit after getting stomped by the world champion and others.
yeah. So
Yeah. Hopefully, I won't
we-
stomp too many people. I
Yeah.
will let my partner do it and try to not micromanage. This is going to be really hard for me, so I'm already preparing. Not
Well,
micromanage.
You've got a lot of experience coaching now, so
This is true.
you can just go into coach mode and you'll be fine.
Yeah. And in seriousness, you play bots in Apprentice stuff. It's not until like ladder stuff that
That's
you hit
true.
real people.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
just kind of a funny joke.
So we also got a bunch of bug fixes and game improvements as usual. We're not going to read every single one of them, but there are some that are significant that we'll touch on. So one of the big things is that they are slimming down the client size, especially on mobile, or particularly on mobile. And so the mobile client will no longer automatically include mercenaries or solo content. You're going to have to do a separate download for that. So the downside is if you want to go play dungeon runs or whatever, you're going to have to download it the first time you do it. The good news is that if you don't, which you probably don't, because I mean, I don't know who's going in to play mercenaries right now since the XP change, and solo content is you'll check it out and you'll download it, but you don't have to wait for that to download every time that you update the client. So that's a big deal. And they're going to continue to improve on that modular download experience. So hopefully that'll be a little bit easier to get, especially if you have limited space on your phone, like an 8 gig phone, or I don't know if they sell like 16 gig phones. Like that's rough, right? So whatever you can do to make the size of the install less is always a good thing. Odin's battle cry can no longer be stacked if played multiple times. I did not realize that this was a thing, but that is freaking
it's a thing.
terrifying.
I've done it.
Yeah.
It's satisfying. I've also faced
pretty
it, and it's
gross.
terrifying.
Yeah.
So it is no longer a thing.
Partner cards will now check cost only when you play them, so playing them can't negate their own effect due to cards that change cost based on cards in hand or minions in play. So like if you had something like a like a mountain giant, I don't know if you're gonna get a mountain giant down to 4 with the partner, but
Do you know the actual use case of
What's
this?
the actual
that
use
happens
case?
so often.
Yeah.
You would bone spike, and greedy partner would not be active.
oh yeah, okay, that
Right,
makes sense.
so like
Yeah,
you
that's
would
better.
bone spike greedy partner, and it wouldn't give you a coin because it would consider all the things in your hand to still be 0. Well, it would it maybe would give you a coin if you had a 4 cost that reduced to 2, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, basically it would see all the 2 drops in your hand and be like, those cost 0 right now, even though greedy partner should have used the discount. It was very strange things. Yeah.
So the one downside to this is that there's one known issue that we're going to cover. We're not going to cover the rest of them, but the one that's there is that the partners, the interaction between partner and shadow step broke. So if you shadow step the greedy partner, you would not, and played it again with a 2 cost card in your hand, you would not get the second coin. They've done a hot fix for greedy partner, but the other 2 partners are still broken in that way. So that'll be fixed in a future patch. But greedy partner, they pushed out a hot fix to fix that because that was the one that people actually play. So they finally fixed the bug that causes disconnects when Magister Dondraft's hero power and Artificer Zymox Infuse got played. So you can go back to playing Relic Demon Hunter without worrying about disconnects anymore. Enjoy that. They fixed a bug where forging or trading a minion that was in your hand because it was the Mirage from Paladin, from Spirit of the Badlands, would give you an extra copy of Mirage in hand.
Oh.
Yeah. So
That was something we were not necessarily completely sure whether it was intentional. That's been in there since the start, that people would notice they got extra mirages.
Which is actually not good. Like,
Yeah.
I've by other means gotten a second Mirage before, and I think like I got another spirit off of the Discover Paladin card minion, Muckborn Servant, and it was too much. Like, you just when you're playing stuff from your hand that doesn't actually go away, your hand fills up, and it's actually hard to get rid of enough cards. So I would just be like passing up on the spirit offer, certainly one of them, if not both of them, many turns, because I was like, I need to empty my hand.
Yeah, I've run into that with the Svalna spell too. And like that, because that's the kind of thing that you'll like Creation Protocol or whatever, and like, oh, now I've got the second one, and now this is an abundance of riches that I don't really want. Like, do I really want to play the 6-drop? I want to play the body, but I don't want another copy of the spell. So this was a fun one. Fixed a bug where cards transform by shenanigans, which is a secret that turns the second card your opponent draws into a banana, would retain their death rattles, allowing to, and I'm quoting from the patch notes now, Sigh, destroy the enemy hero with a banana that had Mechathoon's death rattle. Talk about shenanigans. So
I want to see a clip. Like,
I mean, who discovered
incredible.
this?
I don't know how you even get there. Like, how do you figure that out? I don't know, but it's fixed now.
You figure that out with you play a shenanigans to stop your opponent from killing you with Mechathoon.
And then you die anyway.
No. Oh yeah, I guess you do, because they get the banana, right? It turns it into a banana.
It turns it into a banana, so then they play the banana on whatever.
Something
that has the death rattle on it. The minion dies.
Thinking, oh well, I've lost this game, and then they won. Yeah. Yikes.
I'm just gonna play this because what else am I gonna do with this banana? And then they do the thing anyway, and just like play it out, and then their opponent dies anyway. So Fix a bug where excavating epic and legendary treasures resulted in a small spike of lag, so you could see like frame rate drops and stuff like that. So that's fixed. And lots of fixes to animations and sounds, including the special hero power animations to the hero power portraits, Elise the Leader, and Pit Boss Reska. So, those were noticeably missing, and those are back now. So that's the first patch. We're going to talk about the second patch and explanations, but we also had there was a friend of the show, Tomberry Blue, had written a pretty good Reddit post about the state of Priest, and I figured since at least two of us are Priest enjoyers on the podcast, that we could talk about it. I'm not going to read this word for word, but you can go ahead and listen, and we'll link it in the show notes, and you can read the whole thing after the fact. But he first goes through like what the class got in each set. So in Festival of Legends, the focus was overheal. I mean, it got a couple of other things. I mean, like Power Chord Synchronize is significant, but it got a lot of overheal synergies, which he in particular has tried every possible permutation of an overheal deck and has not really gotten it to work consistently. In Titans, the focus was automatons and Raden and things that cared about copying cards from your deck. That hasn't really gone anywhere. And Megasa's recent experiments aside,
I this is not at a place where I'm ready to say, oh, we fixed it, Tonberry.
Yeah.
And Tonberry's very aware of these decks. So
yeah. And in Badlands, it got bottles and 1-cost cards and Pip the Potent, and it got 1 card for Highlander, which is like the one Highlander deck that's not, I guess, one of the 2 Highlander decks that's not actually played. Like Shaman, Hunter, and Paladin have all seen significant play. Demon Hunter's just in trouble in general, and then and Priest have been the ones that really haven't seen play. And even like I played a little bit of a Highlander Priest this weekend, and it did not run Elise. It just ran Reno. So basically he goes through like what do we need, but rather than saying just make better cards, right? And basically what he comes to is that the class doesn't really have win cons. It has a lot of ways to do things in the early to mid part of the game, and it has control tools, but it doesn't actually have any way to win the game, and it doesn't have anything that it's particularly good at other than delaying things, really, which is, I think, is a fair criticism. I've personally stopped playing Control Priest just because I don't understand how I'm supposed to end games, and I think that the problem with like just a control attrition style deck in this modern era of Hearthstone is that there's so much value generation in standard that you just can't attrition your opponent out of the game. It's something that I noticed when I was playing Twist, that like that was actually a thing you could do when I was playing Anyfin Paladin, where you could actually just like run your opponent out of stuff, and they're drawing 1 card a turn, they're not discovering, they're not chain discovering, and you could actually just kind of end the game by just like having answers for all their threats and lining them up properly and then running them out of stuff. You cannot do that in modern Hearthstone. There are too many things that you lose to, like Ignis, like, I mean, Reno can just generate, the hero power can generate stuff. You have things like Nerubian Vizier, which I've kind of said for a while, that's not really an issue anymore, but it was for a long time when like Blood Death Knight was a thing, like how much generation you get there, and like so many cards just generate or draw more cards that you can't really run your opponent out of stuff, especially with Renathal where you have 40 card decks. So I don't know, did either of you have any thoughts about this when you were looking at it? Like, do you disagree, or what do you think about this?
There were surprisingly, sometimes the conversation on Reddit is not always the most productive, but I thought, not only was this a thoughtful post, but there were some thoughtful replies. There was someone who was thinking about the comparing Overheal to Enrage, where damaging minions is what kind of tends to naturally happen. Obviously, the thing your opponent most wants to do is just kill them, not damage them. But it's easier without supporting cards to damage your minions. Whereas Overheal, it has a little bit of the Naga Priest issue of you need both the minion and the enabler card in order for it to function at all. And so if you draw just one or the other, now that's something that is not insurmountable. Paladin, any sort of buff Paladin like Paladin right now, is quite good, and you can still. But I think it's quite good in part because you don't necessarily have to draw your buff spells in order for it to function. And so you don't run as many of them, and so you're less likely to have those games where you just only draw buff spells and no minions, which I do have every once in a while, and it's frustrating, but it's not very common. Naga Priest, it would happen more often, and I think was part of the reason why a lot of people didn't join me on the Naga Priest train, is that you would have games where you only drew Naga, or you only drew like the Wig and the one that made it taunt and copied it, Boon of the Ascended. I can't believe I forgot the name of that card. And you wouldn't actually get enough Naga. So I think that is one. I don't think that's an insurmountable thing on the Overheal, though, especially if you have overhealing minions. The minions that also heal, I think, that are maybe a little bit stronger in a vacuum than, say, the Dreamboat Naga one that does that. Just so that you don't necessarily have to draw your cards in a very exact order in order to make that more aggressive priest work. Because I do really like the idea of going back to a priest that's, we play a lot of minions that have really high health and you can't get rid of them, and they just get bigger, and then we kill them with you, kill you with them. Or they get bigger, and then if you don't clear them, we make them really big all of a sudden out of nowhere. Inner Fire, Bless, Divine, what was the one that doubled your health? That was a part of Priest for a really long
Divine
time.
Spirit, yeah.
Divine Spirit. And that kind of minion-based burst, I think, is something that I wouldn't mind seeing in Priest. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think that would also be something that would be less frustrating to play against than some of the things that Priest has had. And these are certainly things that, all of the suggestions, I think, would be things that would be less frustrating to play against than just an attrition deck. I'm in a way, I'm not sorry that attrition is hard these days.
I mean, what I would say about all this is I agree that the direction has seemed kind of weird, but I don't know how different some of the things have been than in other classes. Like if we look at Mage, it has also had a lot of like packages that we end up just taking a couple of cards from. Like there have been times where the best Mage deck was using a fraction of several different packages from various expansions for just a Frozen Touch aggro deck, right?
Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah.
You weren't running Kel'Thuzad, but you ran Deathborn stuff, and you ran Frozen Touch, and you weren't doing elementals, but you had like some of them. There've been, and like, just because there were various good cards that were printed, and Priest has some of those, right? Like Amanthul is an insane card still,
Yeah.
and has the ability with Power of Creation, with Power Chord Synchronize, to play those good cards again and again. And so that has kind of sort of seemed like their thing recently, is just like, hey, if I have something that's good, I can do it over and over again. I know there's a bunch of times where I'm just like, oh, they have 3 Ignis, I lose, right? Like, so I think it's a little, in some ways, a little disingenuous to say like that value is completely irrelevant now. Like a lot more classes are able to compete in the value game, but Priest is still the best in town when it comes to value. And I know there have been many times as like a Blood Decay, my frustration of like, great, I play my not Mordresh, the
Mograine?
Mograine, and then they like double synchronize it, and I lose because I played right. Like Priest can kill you with your own win conditions as ever, but where it struggles is the matchups where it has to take something away from the opponent or it loses. So that's like Odin Warrior, that's Sif Mage, that's why Dirty Rat and Theotar kind of things are so necessary, is because there are certain better win conditions which Priest does not have, but has to try and deal with sometimes. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. Certainly, if Priest were better at dealing with those decks, ladder might be a lot more of a miserable place.
Yeah, but at least
I,
like those games would end, right? Like
I mean, they do end because they get Odin or Sift, right? Like,
yeah, well, I mean, but it just takes forever, and they don't have anything to work towards of their own. Like I miss the priest quest. I miss seek guidance, right?
I was
Because
I was kind of building towards that, which is
yeah,
I never thought I would find a time where I'm like, oh, yeah, the priest quest was good, like
yeah,
because it gave the priest an actual win condition, which seems weird because it was so long winded, etc. But yeah, sometimes they ended the game, and there are a lot of experiments with the draw engine that is clergy, which there can be another discussion on how okay that is, uh, but it's a thing people are doing. I lost to that Tony deck. I ran into one as well, and they don't have any plagues when they replace their deck with yours. So I think people are figuring stuff out, and we've seen in the past how much a rotation can change things. So I would not say automatically, well, Priest is going to be screwed next year because it's losing all these good cards. We have no idea what they're going to give it in core. We have
that's
no idea
fair.
what they're
Yeah.
going to put in a new expansion. Like, so much can change between core and new expansion. Hell, they could bring Radiant Elemental back, right? Like, there's all kinds of
Please don't.
levers that they have access to. I mean, no, I'm not saying that's the thing that they should do, but there's a lot of options, and I think this might have been one of those moments of like, oh, we made really good control tools
Yeah.
for Priest. We can only afford to give them so many really good things that would also work in that, and so it's kind of put us in this awkward state. But I wouldn't be surprised if come 4-set meta next year, there is a priest deck that is good because of stuff that they put in core, that they added to that new expansion, and even potentially some of the things that are already around but can't compete with some of the current stuff going on, but maybe are able to shine a little better. Whether it's the one cost stuff, whether it's Overheal, I could really see Overheal,
that stuff
maybe
stays.
coming back in 4-set meta.
Yeah.
The hauler, injured hauler, if you can get it going, which is sometimes the trouble, but it can just solo matchups, board-based matchups. It's the one that is a 3/7, but it deals 4 damage to itself as a battle cry, and when you overheal, it does 2 damage to the opponent minions. If you can't deal with that as a board-based deck, you just never get on the board again. And I think again, I may be an unusual priest player, but I would love to see. I think that it's almost there, and maybe we'll even be able to figure something out before rotation. But a board-based, not necessarily completely aggro, but board-based priest that just makes big things, keeps them alive, controls the board. You might even have something like that, and it's Reno, because Reno can be surprisingly aggressive if you intend to get that far in the game, if it's more of a mid-range, dare I say, deck. Because Reno doesn't destroy your own board and prevents them from building a new one, and gives you a 2 damage hero power, and you just keep going. I would love to see a deck like that, and I don't think we're far off from it. I do know it's frustrating when you're a class main
Mhm.
and
Yeah, for sure.
feel like you're
Yeah.
not being able to get the kind of decks that you want to play. And it's not the only class that has seen it packages multiple sets in a row. I know Rogue has had some of this as well, except for Mech Rogue. It's a good deck. Whole packages not come together. If we can get something
Demon
a
Hunter
little
in
bit out of
particular
all
too.
of these, though, Demon Hunter, yeah, since Relic hasn't had as much, although we'll talk in just a second about Demon Hunter, but if we could do a mage with it, just enough different things that happen to work together. Like you were saying, Edel, we didn't necessarily do skeletons, but we've used a ton of those skeleton cards just consistently. Cold Case, and for a while, Deathborn were just staples in Mage. Cold Case still. So, and Frozen Touch just turned out to enable a million different things. So, something of that ilk, I think we're probably not far off. But I completely sympathize with Tonberry being frustrated as a
Oh,
class main.
I think another thing that adds to it, right, is this actually like the strength of the neutrals, right? That we've had these neutral, strong legendary win conditions that because everyone has access to them, even though Priest still uses them and can do them multiple times, the biggest one being Ignis right now. But um, I think it also takes away from Priest feeling like Priest, right? Like it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like I am a Priest that has this win condition that is mine as a Priest. It is I am a Priest, and so I can Power of Creation or Power Chord Synchronize this neutral win condition that everyone else is also playing.
Yeah. And I mean, Ignis is also like it's part of the way there. It's often not all of the everything that you're going to do, right? I mean, there's everyone's running Vipers now anyway because Ignis is everywhere, so it's
Right.
a
Although
pretty easily diffused win condition. But
Priest is the one who can
yeah, can get
do
more of them.
the 3 or
Yeah,
4 of them. But
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, and as far as Overheal's concerned, like it did take a while for Enraged Warrior to come together
That
to the
is
point
true.
where it needs to get nerfed. We'll talk about that in a second. But also, like, when Enraged Warrior has been good has been when we've had either Risky Skipper or Sun Fury champion, right?
Mhm.
And I think, and that's what Overheal doesn't have, right? Because you're having to spend healing effects in order to trigger the overheals. You don't have something that will heal all your minions for one when you do something, right?
We have Fan
And
Club, but a
yeah.
minion that has something like that would help a lot.
Yeah, like a repeatable effect that you can spam, right? Because you can spam Sun Fury and chain several fire spells in a turn and get a whole bunch of enrage effects, right? You can't necessarily do that with the overheal. The only other difference between enrage and overheal is you only have to damage the minions once.
Right.
With enrage, right? You have to keep overhealing the minions, which means you're using up all these resources, and it gets into this weird state where you're kind of have like two halves of the deck. You have the fuel and then you have the kindling. And if you don't have the fuel and the kindling together, you don't make a fire, right? And sometimes you draw all the kindling and no fuel or or no spark, right? Or you draw all the sparks but no kindling and you don't end up doing anything. And that's what kind of makes Overheal when you're going all in on it kind of a weird deck.
I would be a little bit worried about something exactly, flipped skipper like, right? Like if you had something that had a trigger that healed everything for one, you're just gonna get Hadanis machine gunned, and I don't.
Yeah, then they bring the damage down, right? Like
But
there's ways you could get around that, but
Just yeah, I mean, I'm like that. That sounds like a good time. Just...
but then it wouldn't be an overheal deck, is what I'm saying. Is you would
That's
just
true.
switcheroo
it's an
for the
OTK
thing that
deck, yeah.
right. So what I might more like to see is maybe an overheal minion that when it's overhealed like gives you a healing spell or something like that.
Yeah. Or it could just be like the first time you do X each turn, heal your board, right? Like maybe that's what it is, and something
But
like
yeah,
that. So you're
something
not machine gun.
repeatable.
Like there are ways to do it, but I think like the problem is that you just like heal it. Like other than your hero power, like it's a limited resource, and it's
Right.
not always easy to do. and you just keep having to use that up, and then you kind of end up just going all in on one turn, and then your opponent clears it, and then you're just like, okay, well, I guess I'm done for the day, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm sure that the team will figure it out. Like, there's a few classes that are kind of in bad spots right now, and this does seem like it's a bit of a factor of Priest getting so much good stuff that it's the same reason that Rogue really hasn't gotten anything like miracle-y in a couple of sets, because since they printed Sinstone Graveyard, they can't really print those kinds of cards because everything's just on the verge of breaking and becoming a broken deck. So it's probably the same thing as far as like control tools as where Priest is concerned. But I'm sure that they'll get there, but it might just be not so much that we need to wait for rotation because all these broken cards are there. It's going to open up design space and everything, but everything's going to be gone. But more, it'll open up space for them to print new stuff, and they can bring some stuff into core that maybe will be fun.
Yeah.
So.
I am astonished that there is not a Miracle Rogue on ladder right now. It seems like it should have been a home run with Greedy Partner, and it just has not manifested. And I can't put my finger on like
please don't speak
what's
that
holding
into
it back.
existence.
There's definitely been experimentation on it, but yes, it is surprising that it's not, especially as it's the kind of deck that a lot of content creators enjoy
Yeah.
iterating on. So, but we'll see.
Well, you know what else we like iterating on is tournaments. So
What?
that's that pro level segue that you get right there.
I don't know about that one. It's not your best work.
But let's go talk about tournaments anyway.
It's the grand tournament!
So we have, of course, the World Championship coming up. It's going to be next weekend, the 16th and 17th. And remember, it is going to be players who, won those 3 Masters Tours we've had this year, and then everyone else is getting there on points. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and it's nice to have it earlier. It's been a minute. But this is the big one, right? Like, it's a very large prize pool, and what everyone has been working towards, right? So there's been lots and lots of ladder grinding and heartbreak put into this, and I think everyone should support by watching. We talked about it last week, the players who are involved and everything, but just once again, reminder: World is coming up. Please watch. We'll have one more show before it happens. The balance patch that took place today was specifically called out as being preparation for Worlds. I guess in hopes of seeing some more Excavate cards, seeing as they buffed a bunch of Excavate stuff and then toned down, Mage and a Rage Warrior a little bit. I think hoping to perhaps avoid the exact same decks of in Rage Warrior and Sif Mage all over. We'll see how much it has an effect. Then we also had, on a smaller scale, the Battle of the Discords from this past weekend. The winner was Rusinho from Tierras de Fuego, and the runner-up was Chewy from THL. So, Coin Concede's own, is the username Potato? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Potato,
Yes.
or sometimes Potato Cat.
Gotcha. Okay. Got into the top 16, but unfortunately was not able to make the next day. So bummer about that, but still good job for making it in the top 16. And then also from Coin Concede in the Swiss rounds, we had Donkey at 19 and Minmon at 20. And then other people who participated: Panacea, Catharsis, Pilot, and many others. So thank you all for representing Coin Concede. And we've got in the show notes a link to the Battlefy. There was also a Solary Grand Prix. Tic Tac won. There's not a lot of information on this. you might be able to find the VODs on their channel, etc. But solar events are always great. And then as we speak, well, maybe not anymore, but Supergirl Gamer Pro is doing their Battlegrounds event, which I always recommend to women who want to get more competitive in Hearthstone esports to participate in Supergirl Gamer Pro events. And so, if you're curious what it's like and missed that this was happening, you should go check out either the VODs or some people, I know Smarms was streaming her participation in the event. So, show some support for those as well. Really, really fun events to do every year. I was bummed I couldn't participate in the last constructed one. It just was not enough time. But yeah, that's it for tournaments. And now I think we should talk about those pre-Worlds balance changes that we just got.
All right, so one thing to keep in mind on the balance patch 28.2.1 that came out today, Friday, December 8th, is that they could only make numerical changes on this patch because it was a quick turnaround to be a fast one to be before Worlds. So there are some changes that they might be considering making that just required a rework, a text box change, that therefore was not going to be something that was going to come into this patch. So do keep that in mind. They also, in their dev comment, this is specifically their balance patch for Worlds, and that is why they requested this early balance window to make the coolest Worlds possible. They say, overall, we think the meta is in a good spot with most classes having something interesting to play and most top decks having play patterns we're comfortable with. We'll come back to that line. That lets us take a high confidence, stepwise approach with this patch instead of making risky, drastic changes. So there will be another balance patch. They say we have another balance patch window lined up for shortly after Worlds where we'll be able to make more changes, including maybe some more adventurous buffs. We'll keep an eye on how these changes land, and we hope you'll join us for the World Championships on December 16th and 17th. In terms of this exact patch, the biggest standout they wanted to adjust was Enrage Warrior, and they also wanted to make Sith Mage, quote, a bit more attackable. And they were taking the opportunity to buff what they feel are underperforming archetypes, especially ones with new cards. Excavate as a whole got a lot of buffs, including to a treasure at each rarity, to Burrow Buster, and some class Excavate cards. So it really seems they were focusing a lot on the newer cards that maybe hadn't landed as much that they felt they could make numerical changes to. There, something like Elise maybe would require a text box change probably from Priest was the discussion we were having. So it's not necessarily that they won't do that, but that is probably not just a number change, maybe, but they also might feel like that counts as an adventurous buff. In terms of the feeling most top decks have play patterns we're comfortable with, I know there have been some debate over Reno, whether there's too many Reno decks and whether it's too oppressive or too value-centric. There were definitely and are, obviously data not so much quite yet. The balance patch just came out this morning as we're recording this, but Reno decks were not necessarily completely dominating the top decks, I think is the perspective that they're coming from, and also is a extremely popular new card. So certainly, I'm sure they're keeping an eye on Reno. I have sometimes been frustrated with Reno, I will admit, but this was not the patch. The top 5 decks going into the patch are Enrage Warrior, Reno Hunter, Dragon Druid, Mech Rogue, and Aggro Pally, according to HSR. So
right.
It's just a very popular archetype.
I'm actually less surprised that they didn't touch Reno and more surprised that they didn't touch Doc Holliday. Because
really,
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at Diamond through Legend last 3 days across all decks, Dr. Holiday is the number one mulligan win rate card.
Yeah.
66.4% win rate when kept in the mulligan, and a drawn win rate of 60.9%. And I'm sure that the drawn win rate is lower in the games where you're drawing it on like turn 20 and you don't have enough time to swing with it.
Yeah.
So I'm a little surprised about Doc Holiday that wasn't touched, but maybe they have something else planned. Maybe they're gonna, do something with the frogs, or I don't know what they're gonna do, but they might have something else planned that's not necessarily numbers change. But I figured that, or maybe if they're going to, I guess if they're going to change like the durability on the weapon, that's not a numbers change. That's a text box change at the end of the day.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. One complaint that I saw from a few people, including I believe Sottle, was worrying about that what you're saying, and that there's certain cards in decks, even if the deck isn't overperforming, that there's such a difference on whether you happen to draw this card, whether you draw it on time, whether you have it in the mulligan.
Yeah.
That doesn't always feel like the best play experience. If it's and there's always going to be cards that are better to have in the mulligan.
Yeah. Well,
But
one thing I would consider with Holiday specifically as well is, well, we're in a Viper meta, right? And some of
Yeah.
that is because of Holiday, some of that is because of Ignis. I think, I talked about I have Viper in my Plague Decay and another Viper in the ETC because I feel like anything that's slower just has to do that, right? That's how it is in Wire's Highlander list as well. When you have No Hands saying that his deck building process for this meta has been like Highlander, Renathal, and Viper, and like oh yeah, Viper and Ignis, right? In like
Yeah.
all the decks, right? Renathal, Viper, Ignis, and like I don't know. People, it's really popular, right? I think the combination of having both Reno stuff and Renathal options, like there's so many possibilities for deck building, and people are really excited, and so they're playing a lot of Reno decks. And yeah, like Subtle was saying, when they have the thing, it feels awful. And Reno sometimes being the thing, because it is one of, if not the most infuriating board clear. Like the fact that like what it does to your next turn as well.
yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
tough. Like, and I set up things sometimes specifically in which, since people are Highlander, they're often running Yogg or something
Yeah.
like that. So you set up these situations where you're like, okay, so I Reno them this turn, and then if they have a big minion to play for that one big minion, then I steal that, right? It's just these play patterns that are really frustrating.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I just want to point out on, again, I hate to keep harping on Doc Holiday again, but like it's not just the highest mulligan win rate, it's also the highest drawn win rate across every
Yeah,
card
yeah,
in
yeah.
standard. And so its drawn win rate is 60.9, Sif's drawn win rate is 59.3. Okay. So I'm just gonna leave that there. But anyway, that's what they didn't buff. But I think we probably should talk about what they didn't nerf. But I think we should probably talk about what they did nerf.
So they nerfed 3 cards. The first card was Inquisitive Creation, which, of course, if you haven't seen it everywhere somehow, was 4 mana 3/4 battlecry, deal 1 damage to all enemy minions, improved by each spell school you've cast this game. Now it went from 4 mana to 5 mana. Even people who I've seen who are big, can we please not hit the combo decks, people are like, yeah, fair, that card was insane. Thori Balor is now a 4/3 instead of a 4/4. So much more likely to die when it rushes in, and less likely to stay alive to be buffed by your imbued axe.
The whole point of it is that it comes back. So sure.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on if you want it to die or not. It could go either way. But yeah,
It's certainly, I think you feel it when you wanted it to live for your imbued axe turn.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
not
that's fair.
all that uncommon. That it would not just be a repeating removal, but also add to your damaged board. So I do think it makes a difference for that deck, but it doesn't kill the core thing of the card, which is you keep getting to rush for in. So I actually like that change.
Yeah.
Even though I'm sad to be seeing Enrage hit, it probably did need to happen. The other Enrage hit was Battle-Worn Faceless, went from 2 mana to 3 mana.
Yep.
That was always an insane card.
What I do find funny though is that World 8 for a while, I think this was during the Demon Hunter, like Naga DH times, but actually I had an Enraged Warrior with no Battle-Worn Faceless. And that's happened a few times, but the card is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, there certainly, and I could see also making it 3 mana, there could be things in the pipe that would. It's the kind of card that you just always have to consider now when you're making a warrior card.
Well, and just the fact that, you know, your opponent had a damaged Titan and you would just copy it. Like, it's so flexible, and Bloodsworn Mercenary is just your stuff and cost 3. The only difference is that Mercenary didn't become a copy. It made you a copy, right? It was a 3/3 of its own. So
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to see it change to friendly damage minion in the next patch, if Enraged Warrior is still playable. Just because, like,
maybe.
it's very flexible that way when it can get into like a gigantic taunt, or it can turn into a Titan. For somebody, yeah.
I think the biggest thing about this, which, I mean, people haven't been doing this for a bit, but the most notable thing is you can no longer play Grom and Faceless it in the same turn,
yeah.
right? So you can't do that, like, 30 damage combo or whatever with just those two.
And it makes it
not
a
without
lot
Greedy
more
Partner.
awkward.
The Greedy Partner doesn't work as well. Yeah.
It won't even trigger off the Faceless. Yeah.
In your typical straight Enrage, it's very fast, usually. It's a somewhat flexible deck in that it can go a bit longer sometimes, but often you're really going for that quick snowball, and every mana matters. You know, you would often just do this on a Thoribalor. You would do it on your Anima. In fact, you didn't want it in your hand when you had your big turn to buff your big thing. So usually, and that was why it occasionally got cut, usually you're copying something else with it, and every mana that you add makes that a lot more awkward to weave in. So in a way, I like making it a mana higher, but it still has the flexibility. It becomes a card that maybe is more about copying your opponent's stuff and less about that, A, it's a little harder to work into a combo with Grom, and B, it's a little hard to work into just a huge board snowball in the early game.
Yeah. And you could still go Location on 1, Wretch or Atom Extractor on 2, Faceless on 3. That's still a thing you can do. It's just going to be your whole turn now.
I would be surprised if Enraged Warrior is not still good now. Yeah. But I do think that these changes will be felt. And same with Sith Mage. I mean, Inquisitive Creation is just, people would do all kinds of things just to draw.
Yeah, it'll just give aggro. It'll just give aggro a chance, right? To kind of get the damage in before they can clear. And like 4 mana to be able to do that. Like, it still doesn't do a ton of damage, so it's going to be something like a Paladin that's really going to be able to benefit from something like this. I think that goes wide with low health minions, as opposed to something like a Dragon Druid. Like, it's not going to care, right? You need to build that up, and that's not coming out on 4 anyway. But also, like, having 1 mana less to be able to do things alongside the Inquisitive Creation also matters, right? That's something that maybe you can't on 6. You can't do Inquisitive Creation and then Infinitize, right? Now you're gonna have to choose what you want to do. Maybe that makes a little bit more of a difference, even if it's not necessarily affecting you being able to curve it out. It still affects like the rest of your turn that you have available, and that could make a little bit of a difference.
Well, and coming down after Crusader Aura is pretty big.
Yeah, that's true too.
That is true. Yes, it gives it a chance to actually attack once with your Crusader aura before it gets killed. And some of the this might change around. Some of the Paladin lists recently have just been cutting Crusader aura. So I was still running it, but I definitely was seeing a lot of lists that were not running it. But maybe if Inquisitive Creation comes down later, that changes the calculus a little bit. I mean, Rainbow Mage has been, and I'm sure will continue to be, just a really popular archetype as well.
Yeah.
So the amount that you see it matters, and I imagine we will still see it. I mean, people have been playing Rainbow Mage even when it was not over 50% in win rate. It's just a fun deck. It's just a fun deck for many people.
And people were still playing like the excavate version, even though that is significantly lower in win rate.
Really?
Like 10, yeah.
Huh.
According to HS Replay, at least when I looked at it, I mean today's stats are going to be a little bit skewed because it's going to include whatever the excavate improvements are. But like if I'm looking at diamond through legend, like last 3 days, Rainbow Mage is like 53% win rate, and they have the other one listed as Mining Mage, which is 48%. So it's a significant 5% win rate on a sample size like that is a pretty significant drop.
Yeah, I wonder what that's about, because I've found the random secrets generated can be maddening.
When I was
against that deck.
playing it, I did play some of this because I had a quest. I had to excavate 15 cards for the weekly, and I just hadn't been playing excavate deck. So I'm like, all right, I like Rainbow Mage. I'll just play Rainbow Excavate Mage. It was surprisingly often that it was hard to get the secrets down on 4 when I wanted them, or exactly in the moment when I wanted them. And it was just hard to balance the spell schools and the excavate. Often felt like the excavate just like wasn't nearly enough to bridge you, and you either had one or the other, and you didn't have both. So I didn't do very well with it, and I normally do pretty well with Rainbow Mage. So now that may change, because as we're about to get to, they made a bunch of excavate buffs.
Yeah.
Donkey has an important note on this though, which is that there was potentially overlap with like the Romath versions. I know the Yanming rank 1 list was like XL and excavate.
Well, I guess this could be partially a classification issue, but when I'm looking at it, the ones that are listed as rainbow, some of them do have like they kind of get sprinkled in, right? So the mining mages are predominantly Renathal, and the rainbow mages are predominantly 30 cards.
Right.
There are some excavate lists that are mixed in here, so yeah, that might also have something to do with it. I think this probably needs to be 3 archetypes, and HS Replay is treating them as 2. So the 30 card excavate is kind of getting mixed into both. I mean, I'd have to look and see. Yeah,
it's so hard to parse those away from each other, right? Like you could say, okay, if something has Renathal, it's its own separate thing. It's the Yanming list, which yes, he hit rank 1, but it's hard to play and is a very different sort of thing. But yeah, I felt really good about like the 30 card Sif excavate deck, because a lot of times your game plan is just, hey, I've got secrets up to make your life miserable, and while that's happening, I'm building towards this eventual kill you with Sif thing. Sometimes you would get a random Titan that was just nuts, and for 1 mana, and also the excavate deal damage thing is way better than I expected. Like,
the blast mage.
That is a good card. Yeah,
the deck just goes a lot more aggro in the early game now. I mean, both versions, because you run the Snake Oil Salesman and at least 1 copy of the 2/1 that gives you a sludge, right? So you're playing a bunch of 1 drops. You're trying to get early damage in, and then there have been so many times where I'm not doing a really big Sif anymore. You're just doing Sif for 18 damage to get over the finish line.
Especially with, and I think we should talk. I'm gonna skip down and list all the excavate buffs since we're talking about that.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if, especially a 30 card rainbow excavate sees. Certainly, I think people will experiment with it because it just got buffed and people love this archetype. But I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a strong deck. So the buffs to excavate cards: Burrow Buster, the neutral 5 mana was a 6/4 rush. Now it is a 6/5 rush that excavates the treasure. So it's a lot more likely to live after trading. Escaping Trog was a 1 mana excavate treasure with rush. It was a 2/2. Now it is a 2/3. The Canary rare 2 mana treasure that returns an enemy minion to its owner's hand was a 2/1. Now it is a 2/2. So it actually is a little bit more likely to matter as a body. And the 3 mana epic treasure Steelhide Mole went from a 2/7 to a 3/7. That's the one with Taunt Reborn, can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. That can be very frustrating. And I also missed a couple of class ones. Blast Charge, which is the warrior one, destroy a damaged enemy minion, excavate a treasure, went from 3 mana to 2 mana.
It was so embarrassing.
An Antique Flinger from Rogue, which was the 4/3 battle cry. If you've excavated twice, destroy an enemy minion, went from 4 mana to 3 mana.
4 mana 5/4 to a 3 mana 4/3. You should say.
Yes, thank you. 4 mana 5/4 to a 3 mana 4/3.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I'm curious about Excavate Rogue. I mean, the reward is a lot more questionable than some of the other ones, the tier 4 reward for Rogue, but just Antique Flinger sounds like something I'm maybe interested in now at 3 mana. And actually, another change I want to talk about in here that I almost would put in with the excavates for Rogue, not entirely, but Flint Firearm can find the Rogue Legendary.
Oh yeah, truly.
And
yeah.
so I went on a bit of a bender playing. Forgive me, Wicked. Playing a Reno Rogue with one of each of the excavate things and like breakdance and shadow step, and Flint Firearm was one of the more impressive cards in the deck, actually, because there were times where I'm just like, well, my draw situation isn't working out so much anymore because I only have one of each of the concoction cards, but I have this Flint Firearm, and I would just play it like 2-3 times in a game, and so many instances it was like, wow, I'm just like clearing their board over and over and gaining a bunch of life because there's life gain things in there between like the druid one that refreshes crystals and the shaman card, the quick draw deal 4.
Dehydrate.
Oh yeah,
And
dehydrate.
it only
yeah.
costs 1. So I was pretty impressed with Flint Firearm at 3 mana with the ability to Shadow Step. Now at 2 mana. I mean, wow, that's fantastic.
So it went from a 3 mana 3/3 to a 2 mana 2/3, and that's the one Battle Cry. Get a random quick draw card if you play it this turn. Repeat this. So the
Yeah.
quick draw version of Fireheart, but
And
2 mana
and
now.
it, I mean, it might just be a reasonable Reno card now at 2 mana.
It's
like
it's really nice. Like,
yeah.
I wonder if people should have been playing it before.
Sometimes
Probably,
I feel
but-
like they buff things just to remind us that they exist.
Yeah. Well, there's a diamond version of Flint even. So
Yeah. Well, not anymore. You can't. I mean, you could have.
yeah,
They took it out of the store,
right.
so it was right
Oh.
after its time in the store ended. But yeah.
Rough.
That is rough. They also made changes to a few other cards. So Sledge on Wheels, the Warlock rush minion, whenever this takes damage, get a barrel of sludge and add 1 to the bottom of your deck. That went from a 1/5 to a 2/5. It's 3 mana. So the
Yeah.
body, it might actually remove something and
Yeah.
be a
Instead of
body that someone cares about.
just set
It-
up a defile.
Yeah, it always felt terrible when you didn't have a defile with it and you were just
Yeah.
using to try to like get a barrel and but it never did anything. Like two attack, it might actually do something, but just like rushing out a 1 attack minion just felt terrible, and then it usually died with the next attack. Right? You can't actually remove anything that might kill it on the following turn when is it 1 attack. With 2 attack, it might be a thing. I think that deck has bigger problems than Sludge on Wheels. That the problem is like at the point in the deck in the game when you need to, being able to get a clear enough board for the barrels to go face is just very, very difficult to do without other kinds of removal, and there's just only so much room in that deck. But this will help at least.
That deck was really fun in theory crafting, so
Yeah.
and theory crafting, of course, is not the normal meta, as we always remind people, but I wouldn't be too surprised if we get there at some point, but I don't know if we're there now. Certainly people will experiment, I'm sure. We also had a buff for Warrior, so Detonation Juggernaut as a taunt battle cry, give taunt minions in your hand +2/+2, and it went from a 5 mana 3/6 to a 4 mana 3/4. I've definitely been seeing going by in the Discord. We definitely have some Warrior enthusiast deck builders. So what if we try Menagerie again? What if we try Taunt again? This is only one change to 4 mana. I haven't played enough experiments on Taunt Warrior to really be able to speak to whether this makes a difference. Whenever I have seen some Taunt Warriors, and I've always just been like, that's cute, and killed them, but
it makes it less embarrassing, I think. The Taunt Warrior, even in theory crafting, wasn't great. Mm-hmm. So, and if it's gonna work anywhere, it's gonna work in that environment, and it just didn't work there. I mean, I'm not sure what you're curving into at 4 versus 5, but it has to be better. I guess you could curve into like a Ziliax or a Talon, which is something, but or at least be able to curve into like another 4-drop on the next turn of float a mana. But like at 5, to have to wait for that when a lot of your good taunts really cost like 4. Like you really want to get this into like an Azurite. Well, I guess Azurite Chain Gang, you're not waiting for it to buff it, right? Or it is hand in deck, right? No, it's just hand. So you're not doing Azurite Chain Gang. But like a lot of the good ones are just cheaper than that, and like Igneous Lava Gorger, like Sword Eater, even. I mean, I don't think you're playing Slagma on that deck. I think that's a different deck, and I think that's probably super ambitious, but like you don't necessarily want to be waiting that long. You just need to get that down. So, I mean, it can't hurt that deck, but I think that deck probably is waiting for the more adventurous buffs to become what it needs to be.
It's really weird. It's just like the most mid-range pile of things, and it looks like, oh, and we can kind of do Menagerie because like Detonation Juggernaut is a mech, and the Blastoise is a beast, and the dragon with taunt that gets buffed and rushed if it's your only minion. Dragon, like there's
an undead too.
A lot of right, and the thing that buffs your deck is undead. Like there's a lot of tribes there, but it turns out it's not in a way that's like actually a roaring applause kind of thing. So
you don't have room in your hand at that point. Like
right, like
you're only playing 1 card a turn. Like
and all of the payoffs for Menagerie, you have to have the payoffs for Taunt and the payoffs for Menagerie, and none of the payoffs for Menagerie actually have their own minion type.
Well, right, and they take a while. So like maybe you run the one Amalgam Band, and that's just the thing that you're like, yeah, and I get to run this because these things happen to be different tribes.
Yeah.
But a lot of these taunt minions, like older ones that have never seen play, there's the 7 mana 5/6 Naga with taunt that if you have a weapon equipped summons a rush minion, right? And then
Yeah.
there's the demon that doesn't have taunt, but is lifesteal, gets reduced for each weapon you've equipped that game.
Hey, I
But
played that card.
well, right, but in this deck you want to use the same weapon that gets a durability every time you play a taunt and not equip again, right? So
Yeah.
there's just a lot of things that end up being disjointed and making it so like, okay, taunt and menagerie are not really the same thing.
Yeah. It's like, hey, you like Menagerie Warrior. How would you like Menagerie Warrior that is really slow and never threatens lethal?
Yeah.
Like, it's,
Kibler made some kind of black rock and roll deck, right? You know, with the whole
yeah, sure.
with Steam Elemental draw, black rock and roll, and you know, he did okay with it. But I think it needs just a little more density, like a little more something to benefit from, you know, having that undead on 2 to buff your whole deck of taunts.
Yeah. It needs more help in the next patch, probably. I think this is something that at least will help it people start thinking about it. And I mean, the mini set, we didn't say this when we were talking about Heroic Tavern Brawl, but the Heroic Tavern Brawl is always ends like right before the mini set announcement. So we're getting a mini set about a month from now also. So
Like,
between the next
back
set
from
of
the holidays.
yeah, it'll be because
Mid-January.
the Tavern Brawl ends on or it's January 3rd for a week, right? So it's going to end on the 10th. So
Right.
usually like the following week is when they announce the mini set.
And usually it's like
The week after it ends.
announce, and they do
Like
you know,
a couple days of
class a
reveals
day,
and,
or a class or 2 a day, and then it's out. So
yeah.
sounds like mid-January mini set.
Right. So like we're gonna get this next balance patch, and then we're gonna get a mini set like a month later, and maybe the mini set has something that ties it together. But yeah, that deck needs more help than just this. I think it's a good start, but they called this a stepwise patch. This is one of the steps, right?
Yes. To wrap us up, actually, before I forget, one small thing here. Just there's some bug fixes that also came with this patch. The only one that I want to mention is Discovery of Magic will now always offer 3 discover options when played. If you've played enough spell schools that only 1 or 2 remain, it will fill in with random spells from the same spell school. So if you're only missing Fel, for example, you'll get 3 Fel options.
That's actually really big.
Wait.
That's really big.
Oh, from the same. Oh, that's massive. Yeah, then you can actually get something useful.
You can actually aim for stuff. Yeah.
Wait, what about when you've played them all? Is it still a dead card?
It doesn't say. That is a good question. We should clarify.
I guess you know what you're doing tonight.
Playing a 1 mana Discovery of Magic to see if it still offers me nothing with all the spell schools.
Yeah, it only specifies about 1 or 2, so I would say it's still dead, but it also uses the word always. So that is a good question.
Yeah.
The last, but that is really big for Rainbow Mage, I think. So it got a nerf, but at least it got this in the same patch. And the last 2 buffs were to Demon Hunter. So Snake Eyes, the legendary that rolls 2 dice, that went from a 3 mana 2/3 to a 2/4. And Going Down Swinging was the legendary spell from Festival that went from 5 mana to 4 mana. And if you forgot what it does, it gives your hero +2 attack and immune this turn, and then you attack each enemy minion, and you still have your regular attack.
It's really cool. I always liked this spell, and it always felt so bad that it cost 5 mana. Because even if you say like, well, but you can equip a weapon, that breaks after the first, swing, maybe 2. So, and having to increase your attack by other means usually costs at least, a couple mana. So it became very hard.
Not anymore. I mean,
This is
you've
a-
got
this is a
dispose of
momentum
evidence.
deck.
You've got dispose of evidence. You've got
But that's
momentum.
not typically the same deck, right? Like you don't dispose in a going down swinging deck generally. Certainly not at 5. Maybe
I
you
mean,
do
not
at
at
4
5,
now.
maybe at 4. Yeah.
Maybe, but usually the kind of deck that's going to want to clear like that is not was not going to run. Yeah, maybe now it's worth it, but
Yeah. I mean,
largely the significant increases in attack power cost at least 2 mana.
I mean, it's funny because I saw some people saying, "Well, why do they need to buff this? This card was fine." It's like this card only saw
No.
play when it was bugged. Like that was the only time that this was an attack.
Or
is
discovered.
yeah. Or I mean, obviously, or discovered. But like, it's the only time it was put into a deck on purpose is when it was bugged. So, that's something that we can give it a little bit of help and see if it. I mean, Demon Hunter is in a very weird spot right now because either it's completely broken or it has no playable decks, and there's no in between, right? And so I don't know what you do about Demon Hunter. The change to Snake Eyes I don't think matters in constructed. It's if you get it offered in an arena, maybe it's a little bit better. Like that card is not like giving it 1 extra health is not the fix that card needs. I don't know what it needs, but that's not it. But going down swinging, maybe that's enough. Yeah.
It's a cool card, but it is a weird card that doesn't. Yeah, I love it, and I love the animation. I have seen people play it. I think just because it's a cool card.
Yeah,
But
I mean, one of the coolest animations, but it's a
maybe
value
if it
card.
discounted
Yeah,
cards.
discounts would be more in line. Like it's a value card in a class that is about consistency and drawing through their deck, and it's just so kind of out of left field for the class. You're not usually generating cards in Demon Hunter, and the fact that they are not specifically Demon Hunter cards, right? Like they might be, but could very easily be just neutral minions. So it's really, really hit or miss.
Yeah, like they could say class cards, it could say outcast cards, it could say spells, it could say anything to limit that pool would help a lot more than giving it health. But again, that's not the kind of change that they can make in this patch, because those are all text box changes. Maybe those are coming, right? But they can't do that in this patch because these are numbers only changes, and I don't know how this change helps, but maybe it does. I don't know.
I mean, maybe they had expected it to be like, oh, if you're doing Highlander, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, right? So maybe you would run a value card like this. For me, I'm doing Highlander. I'm still doing like snapshot OTK shenanigans, right? You just Ignis, try and hit Wind Fury, and then go for a bunch of attack. Like,
I mean, you could just run the Highlander cards. You could just run the Highlander cards in a regular Demon Hunter deck, just assuming that you're going to draw your duplicates.
I guess it's a little tough with Kurtrus, which you do want to do a lot of times, like on 5. I mean, it varies. It sort of depends what you're up against. Sometimes you want to time it to hit the right thing. Kurtrus on 5 can be hilarious when it's just like, okay, there goes whatever you were doing in the next few turns. Good luck rebuilding your hand while I, am still pressuring.
Having played that clergy deck with Reno at the top end, I will say, even if you're drawing your whole deck very fast, so often, like the last 2 cards are the same, or like the last 3 cards have a double. And in the meantime, this whole time you had this 8-mana card in your hand. So I am skeptical on Reno's really good. I think people are playing Reno in all kinds of places that show that it's probably a little too good, but I would not run Reno in a deck where like everything else that could possibly be doubled is doubled.
Although I definitely have realized games afterwards that I lost because I was like, oh, my Reno was turned off. I still should have played it. Like it's like there was a turn off where I could have just gotten a better hero power and that would have been worth it. So, don't get too tunnel visioned on the battle cry.
All right. Well, I think unless we have any last words on the balance changes, I'm
Yeah.
excited to see where the meta lands with this, and I'm really excited for Worlds. I'm always excited for Worlds. So yeah, but I think that will just about do it.
Yep. So we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at coinconcede.com, where you can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. And write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede, as well as like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. If you would like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Kresh, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottlecaps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Forgiven One, Grizzly Bear, and The Grand Arcanum. Coin concedes.
Well, I will start by coin conceding to Minty Fresh, who I ran into on ladder this past weekend, who messaged me on Discord. I didn't see it till after, like, hey, is that you playing in Rage Warrior? It was. And he proceeded to systematically dismember me with Elemental Mage. He just played Arcane Artificer on 1 into Flame Revenant on 2, which I forgot was a card, which is a 2-mana 2/3 that says after you summon an elemental, give it +1/+1. And then I never got bored for the rest of the game. I could not remove it. The game ended on 6, and he just absolutely destroyed me. And there was like a Rolling Stone that was like 6/5 that was just hitting me in the head repeatedly. Now, in fairness, he got some good discovers. He got a Crusader aura off of a prismatic elemental.
Pretty good.
I forget what the other one was, but I do remember asking him if he could rig my discovers that way on ladder also, and he told me he couldn't. But it was fun. I mean, it's always, fun to run into someone like that anyway, and also it was fun to see how he's using the cards in a way that I don't often get to see on ladder. So it was a fun game, even though I had to go and soak my wounds for a good 20 minutes afterwards. But
you know what he could do? He could give the people what they want and give me that deck list, because that sounds great.
I could give you the deck list because I have it in my HS
you have
replay
it?
history. Oh yes.
Yes. Wait, it has the whole thing?
It looks like it, yeah.
Cool.
At least it has a lot of it, because I definitely did not live long enough to see a Tainted Remnant because I was basically dead at that point. Nor did I see an Aegwin. So
something that I was thinking about, I don't know if this is in that deck, but the Mage card that we were all kind of weird about, the legendary that splits an elemental in half, and we were like, well, this doesn't actually go in Elemental Mage because you just want to split a big thing in half. There's a fair number of elementals that you still wouldn't mind getting split in half. Like, if you don't care about the stats, but like getting that any of the discover things split in half, so you could get cheaper versions and just discover more. Like, it's not terrible. I don't know.
I mean, Tainted Remnant, which I forgot was a card, is a 5-mana 7/4 Battlecry. If you played an elemental last turn, deal 7 damage randomly split between enemies. If that costs 2 or 3, I'd be okay with it.
That's a lot of damage. Yeah,
that's a lot of damage.
Do that twice.
Yeah,
14.
That's
build your own Astalor. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will coin concede first to Donkey and World 8 and other people who are working on the Naga Priest that's not really a Naga Priest. Thank you, that was really fun. And will continue to be fun. Also, coin concede to all of the devs who are finally free of Madame Goya and all of those other cards, so that you can focus on making us a really cool shop and all the other cool things I'm sure that you're working on. So happy for you being free of those cards, hopefully, unless they find a new way to break, which, being someone who teaches computer science, things do find new ways to break.
I'm going to coin concede to all the parents. This is madness. I don't know how anyone does this more than once. And I feel you. Yeah.
Imagine it with 2 at the same time.
I actually hell. I there was like a moment on one of the ultrasounds where they like saw another I don't know thing that seemed like it might have been we were scared momentarily that it was twins, but it was empty, and they were like, okay, not twins. I'm not actually about to just die. Like I can't. It and there exist higher quantities than
Yeah.
twins.
Yeah,
Triplets
once you have to go from a man-to-man
quintuplets
to
like exist.
once you have to go from a man-to-man to a zone defense, it's all over. Like it's
As I should coin concede. I am a twin. I love being a twin, but coin concede to my mother and my father.
Truly, it's oh my god. I don't know how I would do this if we were not living in the same city as both my mom and Rachel's parents. Yeah.
well, as Winston Churchill once said, if you're going through hell, keep going.
Yep.
So
Yep. We started sleep training tonight.
oh,
So at least the first one went well. But we'll see how the rest of the night goes for me and the few nights to come. But hey, if this actually works and she not sleeps through the night, she's too young, we still have to feed her in the middle of the night, but if she is able to go back to sleep without me holding her for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and then having to like gingerly set her down so that she doesn't wake up, yeah, that would be a big improvement.
well, see now that you're doing sleep training, you can use Hearthstone as a sleep training timer. You put her down, you play a game, and then you go check on her. Yeah, how many games can I play before I have to go check on her and then
the games
soothe her?
are extremely variable, right? I would have to play aggro.
Just if it's been 8 turns and they're not dead, just concede.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old hat rule.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's going to do it for us for this week. So until next time, keep calm and pour one out for Madame Goya. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.